What's the best experience you've had seeing a film in the theater? Cinema? My dad always talked about seeing Star Wars in theater and how everyone went nuts when Luke blew up the Death Star. I've only experienced something like that twice when I saw LOTR in theaters. People cheered when Aragorn cut the head off the Wookiee leader at the end of the first movie. The second time was Endgame. Captain America picked up the hammer and I thought the roof was going to come off the theater. I know some people hate cheering, but it was great. It was a theater full of people just as emotionally invested in a story as you were. It felt amazing. Well, I think this might be different from others, but the movie was Red Eye, the 2005 film. It was about horror, thriller movie, at 100% full, but only a few empty seats. Not sure what started it, but towards the beginning of the movie I said out loud, kind of loudly, in an otherwise silent theater, "What the hell was that?" And a few people laughed. So for the rest of the movie, every few minutes or scenes, someone in the theater would make an offhand observational comment, and quite a lot of people laughed. It was like a live version of Mystery Science Theater 3000, mind you. I'm not a theater talker, and this was opening weekend too. There was a scene where the kidnapped lady and kidnapper are driving through this colonial suburb. In the morning, there are old people mowing and tending to their lawns, and they drive this Jeep through the front of this house in broad daylight, and this is just after a conversation about keeping a low profile. I said, "Yeah, the neighbors aren't going to notice that." Fun time. Edit. Apparently this is a lot like other people experience. So in 2002 my missus persuaded me to go see a film she wanted to see, something called 28 Days Later. I had recently seen a trailer for what I thought was this film, and was reluctant to go. Me? It will suck. Do we have to see that one? GF. People have said it's good. Let's see it. I'm not into romantic comedies, but begrudgingly agreed to go. I had very low expectations. Now you're thinking, but 28 Days Later is not a rom-com, and you're right. I had seen a trailer for 40 Days and 40 Nights, some rom-com about not having sex after a relationship. I guess them both having X days in the titles had me confused. Anyway, I had zero expectations of enjoyment seeing that awful-looking romantic comedy. Imagine going in with that frame of mind and then being presented with a kick-ass zombie film. I've never enjoyed a film as much as on that day, not because 28 Days Later is the best film I've seen, but because it wasn't fucking 40 Days and 40 Nights. The Man from Snowy River back in the 80s, this scene gave me chills. It was combination of the protagonist getting a big win, the hoofbeats coming from the back of the theater to the front in surround sound, and the musical score. Funny story, 20 years later I was on a train from Sydney to Melbourne, which goes through the area where this was filmed, and I decided to rewatch this movie during the journey. It was a bit surreal seeing the landscape on my screen and outside the windows. Immersive movie watching should be a thing. Best is hard, but most memorable would be seeing Casablanca in a full theater on Valentine's Day, though I went with just a buddy of mine. So not really a romantic thing. Getting to see it with crowd reactions was amazing. Really highlights how funny the movie is at times. Watching 300 in theaters with all my friends from high school. One of the first times we went to the movies a big group alone like that, and we were just the right age and demo for that movie to hit perfectly. It was just the coolest thing ever for us. I still refuse to rewatch the movie so I don't spoil the memory. The sad fact of getting older is I'll never really have a moment quite like that night again. Going to The Dark Knight Rises with my brother and dad. I was technically grounded for sneaking out to a party and was just generally in the angst shitty teenage head's pace. But comics and movies were always a big bonding experience between my dad, my brother, and myself. My dad let me come along rather than just mope at home that Saturday night, and that night helped me feel closer to my family at a time I was pretty distant. and, as a result, has a lot of warm fuzzy family memories for me. It was technically my second time seeing the movie in theaters, but that night is the only one I really remember. Best cinema experience from like a technical this is cool perspective would be seeing Unrest towards 70mm 2001 Space Odyssey in theaters. I never really got that movie until watching it in theaters. It's almost less of a movie and more of a weird visual experience that's closer to a theme park ride in that setting. Here's a surreal one. I have severe PTSD and theaters are very hard for me, but I really wanted to see Avengers Endgame in the theater. So I bought seats in a really high-end theater that had assigned seating, right in the middle on an open-faced row. Basically the best seats you can get at the Dome. I went to the 5 o'clock show thinking everyone would be busy and the place wasn't too packed. It was packed. So I get settled and the seat to my left is empty, which is cool. They won't seat anyone once the lights go down and they don't run thrillers. Just as the lights are starting to dim, the guy walks up and sits next to me and he is huge. 6'4" and very heavy, massively wide. Not only that, he is absolutely dipped in cologne. I wear the same brand, CK for men, but he just reeked of it. This dude is huge, broad shoulders, big arms, and his head is shaved short and dyed like a soccer ball. I think, oh shit. There goes my movie. My jacket was in his seat and he politely asked me to move it. I got up and slung it over my seat back. He thanks me and is super considerate about sitting down. Despite his size, he scrunches over to give me as much room as possible and offers me the armrest. I tell him to go ahead, but he still won't take it. I smiled at him and said thanks. He does the same. Throughout the movie he doesn't make a sound, never bumps me in the dark, nothing. He is wearing so much CK that my drink tastes like cologne, but it's cool. He is really nice, never talks, doesn't yell or cheer, just watches the film like me. When Tony dies, he moans and starts crying, saying no, Tony, no, please no, starts sobbing and wiping his eyes, cries softly through the whole rest of the funeral, and when it's over we both get up to leave and he looks at me with tears in his eyes and hugs me hard and says, so sad. I can't accept it. Not Tony, he was the best. Then he smiles at me, knocks me on the shoulder and says, great film. We lost Tony, I say. Yeah, we did. Hugs me again and walks out. It was dumb but also the most fun. When the third Twilight movie came out, they were doing a double feature of the first and second back-to-back before the third one premiered. So my best friend and I got tickets to the double feature. Keep in mind neither of us were Twilight fans. I'd read the books but wasn't really a fan. We made a whole thing of it. Got Team Edward, Jacob t-shirts at Hot Topic beforehand and had a blast. We got out of the double feature and could have gone to the third one right away, but both agreed we had on Twilight at that point. One of my favorite pictures of us is us in our t-shirts from that night. We did eventually see the third one together and I drove from 4 hours away to see the last two together since I'd moved. I saw Avengers: Infinite War at the Magic Johnson AMC in Harlem on 125th Street. I'm white dude from Missouri. I don't know what stereotypes you're familiar with, but as far as movie theater experiences go, I don't act the way I appear, stereotypically that is. Stereotypes are wrong, take it easy. At the end of such film, when everything is going wrong, the Avengers are losing and turning into sand, I wasn't the only person screaming and losing my mind. People were throwing popcorn. Holy fuck, it was amazing. I've never felt so connected to an entire audience. It was better than live, read-alongs to Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, when women show up dressed in lack of clothing and corsets with all sort of jiggly bits hanging out. Man, I do love that theater. I met Keanu Reeves at a showing of Side by Side in 2012, a documentary he produced and starred in at the Tribeca Film Festival. The company I worked for was a big sponsor of the film festival, so we got some passes. No one else from the office wanted the Sunday passes, hence, I decided to grab them and take the guy I was dating at the time. He's actually my husband now. Sometimes at the festival, the producers, stars, and directors will do a Q&A afterward. Still, nothing like that was noted on the program. After the film finished, and the lights turned on my date and I talked about how good we thought the movie was, then I heard a voice to my right say, "I'm glad you liked it." It was Keanu Reeves. He talked to us for a while to understand what we liked and took a picture with us. He also invited us to come to a cocktail hour they were having upstairs in the location and meet some other cast members. It was one of the most memorable nights of my life. At the end of the night, Keanu saw we were leaving and came over to shake our hands and thank us for watching his movie. He really is the nicest guy. I have 3 fairly mundane stories, but it just gives me so much joy and nostalgia to recollect. When I was fairly young, my friend had his birthday and we drove down to the closest cinema. It happened to be 40 minutes away at the time. We stopped off at McDonald's on the way, then went to see Bolt. I don't know why. It's such a boring memory, but it was just so fun. Second memory was a Saturday morning and my mom was out. My dad came into my room with my sister and asked if I wanted to go and see a film. I agreed and we went to see Wall-E, another very good film. More recently, I went to see The Irishman at an Everyman Cinema with my dad. The film was 3.5 hours long. But Everyman cinemas are just so comfy and spacious. It was really relaxing and didn't feel too long at all. Such a good film as well. Like I said, all very boring stories, but going to the cinema as a child is the reason for my love of film today. Long ago in the mid-80s I was watching Man Facing Southeast at an indie movie house. It is an Argentinian film about a mental patient who claims to be an extraterrestrial. At one point in this film the patient is allowed to go to a concert at which he, seemingly, gets up to direct the orchestra in the Ode to Joy. Not long into the scene the sound went out in the theater. But no one was sure at first whether this was a malfunction or an intentional part of the soundtrack. As we watched the man directing in silence, someone in the audience started whistling the Ode to Joy. Someone else began shaking his popcorn bag as percussion. Others joined in humming, whistling, shaking popcorn bags. As the scene ended, everyone laughed and clapped. Do not submit this to our that happened because it really did. Then the theater manager noticed what had happened and rewound the film so we could see that part again with the orchestra playing. I preferred our version. In 2015 they played the old Pokemon movie at the AMC in San Jose. They didn't advertise it a whole lot either. I happened to see it on a Facebook group. Anyways, I never really got into Pokemon during my childhood, but my boyfriend did. And I was always super jealous of it. I show up to this theater and it was full of college kids, people in their 20s, and most of them are dressed up. It literally felt like it was the premiere of the movie and none of us had ever seen it before. They laughed at all the corny Team Rocket jokes. They gasped when Mewtwo exposed his evil plan. We cried when Nash turned to stone. Man, it was such a cool experience. Just all these stressed out adults coming together and forgetting about our responsibilities, watching a kid movie and loving it. Best movie experience of my life. My ex got us an invite to an advanced screening of Avengers Endgame a few days before it officially came out. It was set up by a local CBM fan group, and it was definitely the best theater experience I've ever had. The place was packed, the hype was absolutely insane, and the film blew us all away. Since it was an advanced screening, absolutely no one knew what was going to happen. And combined with the grand scope of the film itself, that screening really felt like the event of a lifetime. Loudest crowd ever, but for once, it didn't bother me at all since I was just so caught up in the excitement and emotions. Close competition would be seeing Blade Runner 2049 in the theater for the first time. I was skeptical about the film's merits compared to the original, which remains my favorite film ever alongside A Clockwork Orange, but holy crap. I was just blown away. Villeneuve clearly did his homework. The soundtrack, the cinematography, and the performances were utterly arresting, not only capturing the original's spirit but also advancing it in thoughtful, meaningful ways. One of the few films that actually moved me to tears with its sheer beauty. I ended up watching the film several more times in theaters, and it never lost its luster. I've grown to really love going to the cinema alone. I have diagnosed anxiety, and all the types of anxiety, but I've overcome social anxiety the most out of all of them, though I still have some left, of course. It has been incredibly liberating to say I enjoy going to the cinema alone without judgment or anxiousness of what others think of me going alone. I feel free, and my last experience was going to watch Last Christmas in the cinema. I went at a showing where not many people were in the same theater room as me, which is extra bonus points to really get sucked into the film and atmosphere of it all. And I had a whole free row to myself. I felt like I was on cloud nine, to say the least. By the end, I cried many tears because of the ending of the film and the great moral message behind it all. I didn't wail because there was still people in there, otherwise I would have lulled, but it was nice to cry without being embarrassed as well. Also, Last Christmas is a great, heartwarming film, highly recommended. Great acting by the whole cast, starring Emilia Clarke, Henry Golding and Michelle Yeoh. I was studying abroad in Thailand, and I went to this really dope theater in Bangkok. My friend and I wanted to see a movie, so we randomly selected Long Shot with Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen. There was only one other gay in the theater. He was a Thai native and probably around 50. He was shaking with laughter and was so loud during the entire movie. Movie was okay, but the man was absolutely hysterical. Will definitely go down as my greatest movie experience of all time. Back in the 80s, a few friends told me I had to come to the 8th Street Playhouse down in the Village in NYC. I was told to bring an umbrella, water gun, filled, rice, toilet paper and a bottle of booze, and hide that. Got there and it was the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Never heard of it, but there were people in costume under the screen. Nobody explained anything to me, told me just to go with it. Movie starts and the people below the screen are acting out every word and motion perfectly. I've never seen a movie where the audience acted it out in sync and us sitting read out lines or responses like, "Let's see that muscle twitch." By the end of the night I was hooked and drunk. It was amazing. I've watched it over 50 times and seen it live at the Playhouse at least 10-15 times before they closed it. Fun stuff for sure. I went to see Beavis and Butthead Do America. The place was full of people who were much older. I was the only one laughing and everyone kept looking at me. My dad went to see Blazing Saddles in the theater and had the same experience. The place was full of old people who must have been there for the air conditioning. He was the only one laughing and everyone was looking at him. It's so toss-ups between the first time I saw Return of the King and Avengers Endgame. I was 13 or 14 when Rock came out, and the way they released the 3 films in consecutive years really built up the anticipation. I remember tearing up at multiple points, but it was when those first notes of Into the West began that I absolutely bawled, because the film itself, the trilogy and the journey of it all, was over. The energy in the cinema for Endgame was brilliant. Usually I'm not one for crowds cheering during a movie, but the roar when Cap uses Mjolnir was well earned. Not a good movie, but the experience made me think it was better. I went to see The Nun in the middle of the day with my sister. We bought our tickets ahead of time, and at the moment only 2 other seats were taken. I made it a point to get the best seats in the theater. We get there, no one else shows up. We were the only ones in there, without everyone's bodies soaking up the sound. I kept thinking there were footsteps coming from behind. It was great. Added so much fear to the setting. Just wish it would have been a better movie.